Let me ask you something. When was the last time you looked at your spouse and actually saw them? Not glanced over while scrolling your phone. Not made eye contact while discussing who's picking up the kids. I'm talking about really seeing them. If you had to think about it for more than 3 seconds, we need to talk. Look, I've spent over 2 decades watching marriages implode. Not from the outside looking in, but from the front row seats of divorce court, watching people tear apart what they once swore was unbreakable. And here's what nobody tells you about divorce. It's never the affair that kills the marriage. It's never the big blow-up fight about money. It's not even the moment someone says, I want a divorce. No. Marriages die from 1,000 paper cuts. Tiny, seemingly insignificant wounds that bleed so slowly you don't even notice until you're hemorrhaging. Today, I'm going to share 7 signs that your marriage is circling the drain. Signs that everyone around you can see, but somehow you become blind to. These aren't the obvious red flags like cheating or abuse. These are the subtle killers, the quiet assassins of love. And if you recognize yourself in what I'm about to say, don't panic. Recognition is the first step toward prevention. But denial? Denial is the express lane to my office. Hit that like button if you've ever wondered whether your relationship is stronger than you think or weaker than you're willing to admit. And stick around until the end. I want you to comment with one thing you're going to do differently after watching this video. Let's dive in. Sign number 1, you've stopped communicating. You're just coordinating here. That is the first sign that should make your blood run cold. You and your spouse have become nothing more than logistics coordinators. Your conversations have devolved into a series of data transfers. Did you pay the electric bill? A soccer practice is at 4. Your mother called. We're out of milk. The dog needs to go to the vet. You're operating like 2 employees sharing a cubicle, not 2 people who chose to build a life together. Real communication isn't about exchanging information. It's about exchanging parts of yourself. When was the last time you told your spouse about something that excited you? When did you last ask how they felt about something, not just what they thought about it? I see couples who can coordinate Christmas dinner for 20 people with military precision, but they can't tell you what their spouse is worried about, what they're dreaming about, or what's keeping them up at 3 a.m. Here's the thing about communication. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, if you don't use it, it atrophies. You start small, skipping the deeper conversations because you're tired or busy or because the kids need attention. Before you know it, you've forgotten how to talk to each other about anything that matters. Had one case where a woman told me she realized her marriage was over when she called her husband to tell him she'd been promoted to partner at her law firm. His response? Like, great, can you pick up dry cleaning on your way home? No congratulations, no excitement, no follow-up questions, just logistics. That's not a marriage. That's a business partnership with shared health insurance. The truly insidious part? This happens so gradually that couples convince themselves they're comfortable with each other. Comfortable. As if emotional intimacy is some luxury you graduate past once. You've been together long enough. Comfort should mean you can be vulnerable with each other. Not that you've stopped trying to connect with each other. Ask yourself this. If your spouse came home tonight with news, good or bad, would they choose to share it with you first? Or would they text their best friend? If you're not sure, or if you know the answer isn't you, you're already in trouble. Communication isn't just about talking. It's about being interesting and interested. When you stop being curious about your partner's inner world, you've essentially said, I've learned everything about you that I need to know. That's not love. That's arrogance. And here's what's really terrifying. Once you stop sharing the small stuff, you lose access to the big stuff. Your spouse stops trusting you with their real thoughts, their real fears, their real desires. Not because you're untrustworthy, but because you've shown them that their inner life isn't valuable to you. The fix isn't complicated, but it requires intention. Tonight, ask your spouse one question that isn't about logistics. Ask them what the best part of their day was. Ask what they're looking forward to. Ask what's been on their mind lately. And then, here's the crucial part, actually listen to the answer. Sign number 2, physical intimacy, has become a memory. Let's talk about something that makes most people squirm, the slow death of physical intimacy. And no, I'm not just talking about sex, though that's usually the canary in the coal mine. I'm talking about all physical connection. When was the last time you and your spouse held hands? When did you last kiss? Really kiss, not that quick peck before running out the door. Physical intimacy dies in stages. First, the passionate encounters become less frequent. Then the routine intimacy becomes mechanical. Then it becomes scheduled. Then it becomes an obligation. Then it becomes a source of resentment. Finally, it just stops. But here's what people don't understand. Physical intimacy isn't just about physical pleasure. It's about emotional connection. It's about feeling desired, wanted, chosen. When that disappears, you don't just lose the physical aspect. You lose the feeling that your partner still chooses you. I've watched marriages where couples become roommates who split bills. They're polite to each other. They coordinate effectively. They might even enjoy each other's company, but they've lost that fundamental recognition of each other as desirable human beings. Here's the brutal truth. If you're not touching each other, you're not connected. Human beings are wired for physical connection. We need it. When we don't get it from our primary partner, we either become depressed and resentful, or we start looking for it elsewhere. The excuses are always the same. We're too tired. The kids are always around. We're just not as young as we used to be. We've been together so long, we don't need to be all over each other. Bullshit. You know what kills physical intimacy? Taking it for granted. Assuming your partner will always be there, always be interested, always be available. You stop putting in effort because you think you don't need to anymore. But desire isn't a constant. It needs to be cultivated, maintained, renewed. Your spouse isn't a machine that automatically wants you regardless of how much attention you pay to them. Here's a question that terrifies most couples. If your spouse never initiated physical contact again, how long would it be before you touched each other? For too many couples, the answer is never. One person has become the sole initiator, and the other has become a passive participant at best, or a reluctant participant at worst. That's not sustainable. Eventually, the initiator gets tired of feeling like they're begging for affection from someone who's supposed to love them, and the passive partner gets tired of feeling pressured for something they've lost interest in. The tragedy is that this is usually fixable, but it requires both people to acknowledge the problem and commit to rebuilding that connection. It means making physical affection a priority, not something that happens if you have leftover time and energy. It means remembering that your spouse is not your sibling. They're not your roommate. They're the person you chose to share your body and your life with. And that choice needs to be renewed regularly, not just assumed. Physical intimacy is both a reflection of your emotional connection and a catalyst for maintaining it. When you stop touching, you stop connecting. When you stop connecting, you stop being a couple. You become two people who happen to live in the same house. Sign number 3, you're living parallel lives, under the same roof. This might be the most common sign, and it's the one couples are most likely to rationalize away. You wake up at different times. You go to bed at different times. You watch different shows. You see different friends. You have different hobbies. You eat different foods. You make different plans. Sure, you see each other in passing. You coordinate schedules. You attend the same family functions. But you're not building a life together. You're maintaining separate lives that occasionally intersect. This is what I call married single people. You get the legal and social benefits of marriage, but none of the emotional intimacy of partnership. Here's how it usually starts. You both get busy. Work demands increase. Kids need attention. Family obligations multiply. So you divide and conquer. One person handles this, the other handles that. It's efficient. It's practical. It makes sense, except it's also the beginning of the end. Because when you stop doing things together, you stop growing together. You start becoming different people. People who might not choose each other if you met today. I've seen couples who live like this for years, decades even. They tell themselves they're independent, or that they trust each other, or that they don't need to be joined at the hip. They wear it like a badge of honor. Meanwhile, they have no idea what their spouse thinks about, worries about, dreams about, or wants. They couldn't tell you their partner's favorite new song, or what book they're reading, or what's been making them laugh lately. They're strangers who share a mortgage. The really insidious part is that this often feels peaceful. There's no conflict because there's no real intersection. You're not fighting about different preferences because you're not trying to do anything together anymore. But absence of conflict isn't the same as presence of connection. Here's a question that reveals everything. If you had to spend an entire weekend together, just the two of you, no kids, no friends, no planned activities, no phones, just you and your spouse, would you look forward to it or would it feel awkward? If the thought of being alone with your spouse for 2 days feels uncomfortable, you're not married. You're cohabitating. Real partners don't just coordinate, they collaborate. They don't just share space, they create experiences together. They don't just divide responsibilities, they build something that neither of them could build alone. When you're living parallel lives, you lose the fundamental reason for being married. You're better together than you are apart. The fix requires intentionality. You need to start doing things together again. Not just attending events together, but actually engaging in activities that require cooperation, communication, and shared attention. Cook a meal together. Take a class together. Travel somewhere new together. Work on a project together. Do something, anything, that requires you to function as a team rather than as two individuals who happen to share living expenses. Because if you're not building something together, you're just two people who are slowly drifting apart while splitting the rent. Sign number 4, small irritations, have become relationship poison death by 1,000 paper cuts. I use this phrase constantly because it's exactly how most marriages die. Your spouse chews too loudly. They leave the toothpaste cap off. They don't put dishes in the dishwasher the right way. They interrupt you when you're talking. They forget to do things they said they'd do. They have an opinion about how you drive, how you dress, how you parent. None of these things would end a relationship by themselves. But together, accumulating over time, they become poison. Here's what happens. Early in relationships, these little quirks are either invisible or endearing. You're so focused on the big picture. How much you love this person, how happy they make you, how excited you are about your future together. That the small stuff just doesn't register, but familiarity breeds contempt. The more time you spend with someone, the more their minor flaws become magnified. The things that used to be cute become annoying. The things that used to be quirky become infuriating. And instead of addressing these irritations directly, most people do something incredibly destructive. They collect them. They keep a mental scoreboard of every small slight, every minor annoyance, every moment of frustration. They don't say anything because they don't want to seem petty or controlling, so they swallow their irritation and add it to the pile. Until one day, their spouse leaves a dirty dish in the sink, and suddenly they're screaming about respect and consideration and how they're taken for granted and how their needs never matter. The poor spouse is standing there confused because, from their perspective, they're getting attacked for leaving a dish in the sink. But it's not about the dish. It's about the accumulation of resentment that's been building for months or years. This is how good people become convinced their spouse is selfish, inconsiderate, or malicious. They interpret every small action through the lens of accumulated irritation. Your spouse doesn't put their phone away during dinner. Instead of thinking, they're distracted tonight, you think, they never prioritize our time together. Your spouse forgets to pick up something from the store. Instead of thinking, they had a busy day, you think, they never remember what's important to me. Your spouse makes a joke that falls flat. Instead of thinking, that wasn't funny, you think, they never understand what I'm going through. Every minor incident becomes evidence of a major character flaw. The truly toxic part is that this creates a negative feedback loop. When you're constantly irritated with your spouse, you become irritating to be around. Your spouse starts walking on eggshells, which makes them tense and less spontaneous, which gives you more reasons to be irritated. I've seen couples who can't have a conversation without at least one person rolling their eyes, sighing, or making a sarcastic comment. They've trained each other to be defensive and reactive. The solution isn't to suppress your irritations, that just makes them fester. The solution is to address them when they're small before they become resentments. Hey, when you leave the toothpaste cap off, it bugs me. Can you try to remember to put it back on? That's it. Simple, direct, specific. Not an attack on their character, not a lecture about respect. Just a clear request about a specific behavior. But here's the crucial part. You have to be willing to hear the same kind of feedback about your own behavior. Because I guarantee you, you're doing things that irritate your spouse too. Marriage isn't about finding someone who never annoys you. It's about finding someone whose specific brand of annoying you can live with. And being someone whose specific brand of annoying they can live with. But that only works if you're both committed to minimizing the annoying and maximizing the wonderful. Sign number 5, you've stopped making effort for each other. Here's a brutal reality check. When you stop trying to be attractive to your spouse, you're essentially telling them they're not worth the effort. I'm not talking about being young and beautiful. I'm talking about basic effort, grooming, hygiene, dressing like you care how you look, speaking to them with respect and kindness, being considerate of their time and energy. But somewhere along the line, couples start taking each other for granted. They think that because they're married, they don't need to court each other anymore. They've won their spouse, so the game is over. Except marriage isn't winning someone. It's choosing them every day and inspiring them to choose you back. When you stop making effort, you stop being attractive. Not just physically, though that's often part of it, but attractive as a human being. You become complacent, entitled, lazy about the relationship. You know what's attractive? Effort, thoughtfulness. The feeling that your partner still wants to impress you, still wants to make you happy, still cares what you think of them. I've seen marriages where people put more effort into looking good for their coworkers than they do for their spouse. They dress better for work than they do for date nights. They're more polite to strangers than they are to the person they claim to love most. This sends a devastating message. You're so secured that I don't need to try anymore, but your spouse isn't secured. They're a human being with feelings and needs and desires. They want to feel chosen, pursued, valued. When you stop putting in effort, they stop feeling special. And when people don't feel special in their primary relationship, they either become depressed and resentful, or they start looking for someone who makes them feel special. Here's what effort looks like in practice. You plan surprises. You remember important things. You dress nicely when you go out together. You speak kindly to each other. You express gratitude. You show physical affection. You make time for each other a priority, not an afterthought. You act like you're still trying to win them over, because, in a sense, you are, every day. The excuse I hear most often is, but they should love me for who I am. Here's the thing, they do love you for who you are. But who you are includes someone who cares enough about them to put in effort. When you stop putting in effort, you've actually changed who you are. You've become someone who takes their love for granted. And that's not very lovable. Making effort doesn't mean you have to be perfect. It doesn't mean you can never be tired or grumpy or stressed. It means that even when life is hard, your relationship with your spouse remains a priority. It means you don't give them your leftover energy. You give them some of your best energy. Because here's what I've learned after watching thousands of marriages end. People don't leave because their spouse isn't perfect. They leave because their spouse stopped trying. Sign number 6. Everyone else sees it before you do. Here's one of the most uncomfortable truths about failing marriages. Your friends and family usually see the problems long before you do. They watch you and your spouse interact at dinner parties. They notice the eye rolls, the interruptions, the way you talk about each other when the other person isn't around. They see the distance, the irritation, the way you've stopped touching each other or looking at each other with affection, and they're all thinking the same thing. These two are in trouble, but nobody says anything, because what are they supposed to say? Hey, your marriage looks like it's falling apart? That's not a conversation anyone wants to have, so they watch. They worry. They privately discuss it with each other. They wonder if they should say something. They decide it's not their place. They hope you'll figure it out on your own. Meanwhile, you're inside the relationship, and you've become so accustomed to the dysfunction that it feels normal. You've adjusted to the distance, the irritation, the lack of connection. It's happened so gradually that you can't see how far you've drifted. This is like being inside a house that's slowly filling with carbon monoxide. The people outside can see that something's wrong, but the people inside are too affected to recognize the danger. I've had countless clients tell me that after they announced their divorce, friends and family members said things like, "We're not surprised," or "We saw this coming," or "We've been worried about you two for a while." The people in the marriage are always shocked by these responses. They thought they were hiding their problems well. They thought they seemed happy to outsiders, but they weren't hiding anything. They were just the only ones who couldn't see clearly. Here's a painful exercise. Think about the couples in your life who you think are in trouble. You can probably name at least one. You can see their problems, clearly. The way they don't seem to enjoy each other's company, the way they bicker constantly, the way they seem more like adversaries than partners. Now ask yourself, do you think they know their marriage is in trouble? Probably not. Because if they could see what you see, they'd be doing something about it. The same thing might be true for your marriage. Your friends have probably noticed if you and your spouse have stopped being affectionate with each other. They've probably noticed if you constantly complain about each other. They've probably noticed if you seem happier when you're apart than when you're together. But here's the really important part. They've also probably noticed if things have gotten better. If you've started holding hands again, if you've started laughing together, if you seem more connected. Outside observers can be incredibly valuable, but only if you're brave enough to ask for their perspective. Choose someone who knows both you and your spouse well, someone whose judgment you trust, someone who cares about your well-being. Ask them directly, "How do you think spouse's name and I are doing together?" Then shut up and listen. Don't defend. Don't explain. Don't justify. Just listen to what they see from the outside. It might be painful. It might be uncomfortable, but it might also be the wake-up call you need. Because sometimes the people who love you can see your blind spots better than you can. Sign number 7. You're making future plans without automatically including each other. This is the sign that indicates you've already emotionally checked out. Even if you haven't admitted it to yourself yet, you start planning your next vacation without consulting your spouse. You make major financial decisions independently. You consider job opportunities in other cities without discussing how it would affect your marriage. You imagine your future, and your spouse isn't automatically part of the picture. This isn't about being independent or maintaining your individual identity. This is about no longer functioning as a team. When couples are truly connected, they think in terms of we and us. Major decisions are automatically discussed together, not because they need permission, but because they genuinely want their partner's input and perspective. But when marriages start failing, people revert to thinking in terms of I and me. They start protecting their individual interests instead of considering what's best for the relationship. I see this most clearly in financial decisions. Couples who are heading toward divorce start hiding purchases, opening separate accounts, making investments without discussing them. They're unconsciously preparing for a life that doesn't include their spouse, but it happens in smaller ways too. You get invited to a party and you RSVP for one person without thinking about whether your spouse would want to go. You make plans for the weekend without checking if your spouse had other ideas. You book a business trip without considering how it affects your family's schedule. Each individual decision seems reasonable. But the pattern reveals something deeper. You've stopped considering your spouse as your primary partner. This is different from the parallel lives problem I mentioned earlier. Parallel lives happen when couples stay in their marriage, but stop building together. This is about starting to build a life that doesn't include your spouse at all. The most telling version of this is when people start fantasizing about being single, not fantasizing about a different partner, but fantasizing about not having to consider anyone else's needs or preferences. They imagine having complete control over the thermostat, the TV remote, the dinner menu. They imagine making decisions without having to discuss or negotiate or compromise. When your marriage feels like a constraint rather than a partnership, you're already halfway out the door. Here's the scary part. This often happens without any conscious decision to end the marriage. You don't wake up one day and decide to stop including your spouse in your plans. It happens gradually as you become more frustrated with the relationship and start unconsciously protecting yourself from disappointment. Maybe your spouse has been unenthusiastic about your ideas, so you stop sharing them. Maybe they've been difficult to make plans with, so you start making plans without them. Maybe they've been critical of your decisions, so you start making decisions without their input. Each step seems logical in isolation, but together, they create a marriage where two people are living completely separate lives while sharing the same address. The fix requires a conscious recommitment to partnership. You need to start thinking "we" again, even when it's inconvenient. Before you make any significant decision, ask yourself, how does this affect my spouse? What would they think about this? Should I discuss this with them first? And then actually have those discussions, not because you need permission, but because you're choosing to function as a team rather than as an individual who happens to be married. The wake-up call. So there they are. 7 signs that your marriage is ending, whether you're ready to admit it or not. The communication has devolved into logistics. Physical intimacy has become a memory. You're living parallel lives. Small irritations have become poison. You've stopped making effort for each other. Everyone else can see the problems you're blind to, and you're making future plans as if you're single. If you recognized yourself in 1 or 2 of these signs, pay attention. Make changes. Have conversations. Get help if you need it. If you recognized yourself in most of these signs, you're in crisis. Your marriage isn't just struggling, it's failing. But failure isn't final if you're both willing to do the work. And if you recognized yourself in all of these signs, well, it might be time to face some uncomfortable truths about whether this marriage can be saved, or whether you're just postponing the inevitable. Here's what I want you to understand. None of these problems are insurmountable if both people are committed to fixing them. But they all require honesty, effort, and the willingness to change patterns that have become comfortable, even if they're destructive. The couples who make it aren't the ones who never have problems. They're the ones who recognize problems early and address them before they become terminal. Marriage isn't a destination, it's a practice. And like any practice, you get better at it by paying attention, making adjustments, and never assuming you figured it all out. Your marriage will either get better or get worse. It won't stay the same. The choice is yours. Now I want to hear from you. In the comments, tell me one thing, just one thing, you're going to do differently after watching this video. Maybe it's having a real conversation with your spouse tonight. Maybe it's planning a date. Maybe it's putting your phone down during dinner. Maybe it's scheduling couples therapy. Whatever it is, commit to it publicly. Because the first step towards saving your marriage is admitting that it needs saving. And if this video opened your eyes to some uncomfortable truths, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is tell them what they don't want to hear. Until next time, pay attention to your marriage. Because if you don't, I guarantee someone else will. Fade to black.